To be sitting in your own home and someone come in and murder your mother in front of you and then start on you, it's pretty horrendous.
What else could they have done that would result in such a terrible crime?
The brutality of the killing was incredible.
The Fens, you either love it or you hate it. A lot of people can't stand it because it is featureless. There aren't many trees, but it's got a beauty all of its own. The bleakness attracts people.
It's lonely, it's wild, it's desolate. You either love it or you hate it.
The Fens at various times of the year, I think, can be described as eerie. In the wintertime in particular, it's bleak. It's a place where you can almost, as you drive round, feel there's an ability to get lost.
The people who live in the Fens are vigilant. They do take notice of what's going on around them. And of course, a lot of the people who are in those areas, their day has a pattern to it. So things out of the ordinary do tend to stand out.
Janice Sheridan lived in this remote house in East Anglia with her mother Connie and their 27 dogs. It offered them quiet isolation and the perfect environment for breeding their beloved whippets.
Mum really felt she would have liked a fresh start, and it was really quite obvious that Jan would follow because they were together, and it was an ideal situation where the house they'd bought was just absolutely idyllic and perfect for what Janice wanted to do, was breed the dogs.
So they were very much a couple. They hoped for a peaceful life where they could do just what they wanted to do and not annoy anybody else.
Jan seemed to be sort of isolated as her and her mother tended to cut themselves off from people and just surround themselves with their beloved whippets.
There were very few houses, it was a one-way dirt track really, and she wanted seclusion. She'd walk her dogs up the riverbank, which is just literally out of the back door. She'd let her dogs loose on the field up there. I always got the feeling she thought it was heaven and that she'd arrived where she wanted to stay, and she loved it.
They really didn't need any more company from outside because they really did have all they needed, and that was enough for them.
Dogs were a big part of Janice and Connie's life. In 1994, Janice took a part-time job, helping out at the local greyhound kennels of John Bromley and his partner, Sylvia.
She was the old school, the very old school. She'd worked with horses, she'd worked with dogs and kennels before. She knew about routine and timekeeping. She didn't come to work at 5 to 8 or 5 past. She came at 8 o'clock.
Go on, home now. We'd have a little chat, put the world to rights. She'd ask me what needed doing. Generally, it was the same every day because of the routine in kennels. And she'd get on with it and we'd just have a bit of a laugh and a joke as we went.
She used to help me with the kennel work and the exercising of the greyhounds. She was a wonderful, wonderful lady. Never heard her say bad about anybody. She just got on with her life.
On the morning of Sunday, January the 10th, 1999, Janice Sheridan failed to turn up for work.
Jan didn't appear, which was very, very strange. She was always here. She was always on time. So Sylvia said, well, she said, it's an icy morning, and she only lived a mile away from us. So she said, I'll have a ride up, see if her car's gone in a dike or something.
I went to her house and everything was shut up. The car was there, but I heard all this manic barking, and I thought that was odd, but then I just thought, not really happy, but maybe she seriously has got a really bad cough or cold and she feels just dreadful and just simply can't get out of bed. So I thought, I think I'll just leave it for now, even though I thought at the time, it just doesn't ring true to me. And at the About 3 hours had elapsed, and I went back again because I just had this nagging doubt in my mind. I was frightened the second time I went back because I then, when I realised she wasn't up, started really peering through windows and banging on doors and actually screaming, "Jan, if you're there, answer me, please." And then I think I really did know when I peered through the windows and saw the dog mess and the frenzy that they'd created. There was no way those people in there were actually alive.
Sylvia rushed home to raise the alarm and called the police.
2 policemen came on the scene and told us to wait where we were. And they were gone for what seemed forever to me. It was probably no more than 20 minutes, actually, but it seemed to last forever. And when they came back out, I think both officers were clearly white-faced and ashen, and I just said to him, "Is my friend dead in there?" And he said, "Madam, I cannot tell you any more. Someone will come to see you." All I knew then.
Police are tonight investigating the deaths of 2 women found stabbed in an isolated fenland village.
I've investigated a number of murders, certainly murders involving stabbings to the victims, but this one was particularly brutal.
To have been killed in such a brutal fashion, which in 20 years of policing I'd never come across, it certainly was an odd feeling.
I personally, in my career, never seen a scene like that.
The brutality of the killing was incredible.
The detached house in Upwell, where the blood-stained bodies of the 2 women were discovered yesterday lunchtime. Police are refusing to name them until next of kin have been informed, but it's understood they're Connie Sheridan, who's in her 70s, and her daughter Janice, who's in her 40s.
It was on a Monday night we first heard. And in actual fact, we didn't hear it from anybody. It came up on the news, on the television, and it was just flashed up on there that these 2 people had been found. We then had to just get in touch with the police because they were looking for us.
Today, the police sealed off Pingle Bridge, close to where the women lived. Detectives are working on the theory they were murdered.
It is quite a desolate area. Pingle Bridge itself is not an area that actually leads anywhere. It's a dead-end road, so you wouldn't go down there unless you actually had a reason to go there.
When we arrive there, one of the first thoughts that comes through your mind is, how am I going to find eyewitnesses when the location is so isolated?
At that time of year, which was early in the year, it was cold and it was extremely bleak. And that kind of set the scene, I think, for the whole investigation itself.
Faced with one of the most horrific double murders they'd ever seen, and concerned the killer would strike again, Norfolk police prepared to launch a massive manhunt.
Our grief is indescribable, and we implore...
Devastated, the family appealed for the public's help.
The person or persons responsible must be brought to justice.
It was just like a bad dream, just like a nightmare. You wake up and it's not true. It was just awful, dreadful. We couldn't think, what on earth could they have done to have provoked somebody to do something so dreadful? It just seems senseless. Total waste of 2 lovely lives.
You're grasping at straws, you know, you're trying to think, your head's spinning. Why? That's the big question, the big word that you keep using all the time. Why?
Why choose them? Why go to that house?
Why? What reason? Why?
On Sunday, January the 10th, 1999, a mother and daughter were found viciously murdered in their own home.
It appeared calculated, sadistic, and particularly horrible.
The discovery of 79-year-old Constance Sheridan and 45-year-old Janice sent shockwaves through the close-knit Fenland community.
You don't think that in a sleepy little place like that anything like that is going to happen.
On the Sunday evening, police entered the property for the first time.
When the patrol officers first went to the rear of the property, the first thing they were confronted with was a number of whippets. Some ran outside, some remained in the house. At which point, the door that led into the front room, they couldn't open it. And in fact, what had happened was that the large sofa within that room had been pulled across the doorway to prevent anybody getting in. Once they'd gained access, they looked into the room, and laying on the sofa was Constance. She was clearly dead. And looking across the room in front of the fireplace, they saw Janice, and Janice was lying on her back. She had her feet taped together, and they were actually on an adjacent chair.
There were a vast number of stab wounds to both Constance and Janice.
When we found Constance, who was lying on the settee, it was later established that she had 10 stab wounds, and they were all in her chest and abdomen area. Janice had 11 stab wounds. 10 were in a similar area of her chest, but significantly perhaps one was in the middle of her back. But interestingly, there was very little signs of a struggle at all.
Someone knew what they were doing. This is not some sort of momentary act of madness done on impulse or anything. It was very carefully committed. But there's also a very clear ability to be able to commit the crime in phases, in sections, and not to panic, and to do it quite methodically and purposefully. So all of these things were very striking quite early on.
The way the two women had been murdered was terrifying, but there was another chilling aspect to the killings.
I personally in my career never seen a scene like that, where two bodies appeared to have been left in a particular position by whoever had killed them. Certainly Constance appeared to have been laid on the sofa. Whether that was before or after she died, we may never know. But certainly the position of her body was almost posed to the point where her arms were laid across her chest.
Janice had her legs actually raised from the floor. Around the ankles were bound with a tape. And further examination later actually indicated that it was very likely Janice's wrists had also been bound with a similar tape. And sadly was in a state of almost total undress.
This was very striking, and immediately rang alarm bells that there was a strong sexual element to it.
When I looked at the scene and saw the layout and saw the positionings of the bodies, it was fairly clear to me that this had been a sexual killing.
Another aspect of crime was an interest in bondage, and this was seen in two ways. One, by using duct tape to go around the ankles of the feet, and that was actually left, again showing the desire to see the pose. So increasingly I was thinking this must be some sort of fantasy enactment. This was not something to be hastily rushed through. This was just something to savour, something really to go through. The fact that the clothes were taken off and put on suggests that we're talking not just a quick 10 minutes here. We're talking about someone who could have been in that room for a couple of hours. And he could have taken films of it to take away as a memento. That increases the likelihood that what we're dealing with here is a masturbatory fantasy, which has been held many, many times before, but this time, on this occasion, it was acted out.
With the true horror of the crime unveiled, police now knew they were looking for a very dangerous man. And in such a small community where word gets around fast, local people became alarmed. Would he kill again? And could he be someone they knew?
Murders do happen every day, but not in little